guys, welcome to the Kim Iverson Show. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We do have a really interesting show for you tonight, a really interesting guest. Now, we've been covering on this show numerous cases of the government going after Bitcoin, right? We talked about the banks that they were going after. They were going after all of those, like Silicon Valley Bank. They were going after Signature Bank of New York. There's clearly a concerted effort for the government to go after those who are in the world of crypto. There's also a tendency, and we've covered many of these cases on the show, where the government goes after people they don't like. They are speaking up against the government in some way. They are, they're just against the status quo or the status mentality. We've talked to the Aruhus on this show. We also had the gentleman who was making guns in his apartment, never took them out of his house, never went to a shooting range, but was nonetheless convicted of gun possessions, or I don't know exactly what they even convicted him of, but just these going after people for ridiculous crimes that aren't really even crimes, but it's just the government wanting to shut down anybody who's different or dissent or any sort of movement. And Bitcoin is definitely in the crosshairs. So this case was sent to me a couple of weeks ago. This is the case of Ian Freeman. Now, I don't know if you've heard of him. This is a little known case. But if you Google Ian Freeman, you're going to get, I think actually first you get like a boxer or something, but that's not the guy. If you Google Ian Freeman Bitcoin, you're going to get a whole slew of articles saying this guy's a Bitcoin fraudster, that he used Bitcoin, that he was defrauding people, especially old ladies and old men who are lonely out of, those kind of, our guest calls it the Lonely Hearts Club, or it's like romance scams where somebody pretends to love somebody and then they take them for all their money. And all these articles make him sound really, really bad, that he participated in these romance scams and basically defrauded all of these little old ladies of their entire retirements. Sounds bad. In fact, let me read from what the Justice Department issued after he was convicted and sentenced to 8 years in prison. Ian Freeman is he's in his early 40s. He's been convicted of crimes. He's now sitting in prison for 8 years. They also took all of his life savings. He had made a fortune from Bitcoin, having his own Bitcoin, buying his own Bitcoin. They took all of his Bitcoin. They seized all of it. So it was about $5 million in Bitcoin that they seized it, put him in jail. This is what the Justice Department says about Ian Freeman. This is part of the release that they issued, and this happened a year ago. So October 2nd of 2023. Ian Freeman was sentenced today in federal court for laundering over $10 million in proceeds from romance scams and other internet fraud, U.S. Attorney Jane E. Young announces. Now, this is what they say he did. And listen carefully to what they say he did. Ian Freeman catered to fraudsters. So he catered to fraudsters. Now, this is the talking points we're getting about Bitcoin over and over again, right? That Bitcoin is for criminals. Bitcoin is catering to all of these criminal infrastructure, empires. And that's what's wrong with it. You hear Elizabeth Warren talking about that all the time. So they say Ian Freeman catered to fraudsters. He played a shell game with other people's hard-earned money, turned a blind eye to scam artists who were ripping them off. So they're not saying he was the scam artist who ripped them off. They're saying that he turned a blind eye to the scam artists, or he just maybe didn't know about it, and that his business catered to fraudsters. This is what they're claiming he did. He didn't actually do the fraud, but he had a business that fraudsters were using, and he turned a blind eye. They say, and these scammers walked away with millions. They deprived their victims of their life savings. Today's sentence is a significant step towards justice for the dozens of victims all over the country who have suffered significant financial losses and heartbreak as a result of this man's criminal conduct, says Jody Cohen, special agent in charge of the FBI Boston division. In addition to our efforts to disrupt outrageous schemes like this one, we must also work to raise public awareness and prevent them. Last year, New Hampshire's residents reported losing almost $33 million due to internet-related crimes. So we caution everyone to be wary of people you meet online, especially when it comes to cryptocurrency. Also goes on to say, Ian Freeman's sentencing shows that IRS criminal investigation is working vigorously to stop internet fraudsters like Ian Freeman, said Harry T. Chavez Jr., special agent in charge of IRS criminal investigations Boston field office. Not only did Freeman launder millions of dollars, but he also provided a conduit for other scammers to leave countless victims destitute in their wake. A conduit for other scammers. That means he had a Bitcoin business and people bought Bitcoin, and they're saying that this was the conduit because he allowed people to buy Bitcoin. That Bitcoin was the conduit for scammers to leave countless victims destitute in their wake. The role of IRS criminal investigation becomes even more important in internet fraud cases due to the complex financial transactions that can take time to unravel so that fraudsters like Ian Freeman can be brought to justice. Now, what's interesting about this case was Ian was never convicted of fraud. They're calling him a fraudster. He wasn't convicted of fraud. Our guest tonight wrote a really in-depth article. Our guest is Jacob Hornberger, and Jacob Hornberger is the founder and president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. He was a trial attorney for 12 years in Texas. He was also an adjunct professor at the University of Dallas, where he taught law and economics. He now has an organization, it's the Future of Freedom Foundation, which really has it's an educational foundation talking about libertarianism and domestic policy and whatnot. And I was sent this article by a viewer and read the article. It is so in depth. It is called "The Unjust Conviction of an Innocent Man: The Ian Freeman Case," and it's a 3-part article. I highly recommend you read it. It's very long. It will take a long time for you to read it and understand it. You might have to read it twice, 2 or 3 times, because it's quite complicated. But it really lays out how the government weaponizes the law to go after people they just simply don't like. They don't like their politics. They don't like their Bitcoin business. They don't like their libertarian attitudes or their anti-war stances. Whatever the stance is, they're able to weaponize the law in very unjust ways and use them against people to send them off to prison, to silence them, to shut them down, and to have a chilling effect on anybody and everybody else. Once you hear about this case, I think you will be convinced, like I was after reading this article, that Ian Freeman is completely innocent. Completely innocent. He's been charged with 4 crimes, convicted. He is sitting in prison right now, and he did nothing wrong except have a Bitcoin business. And the government doesn't like Bitcoin businesses. So that is what we're going to be talking about tonight. Jacob Hornberger is joining us. He's going to break down the case, break down the charges. And, by the end of it, I would love to hear from you and find out, what do you think? Do you think Ian Freeman is innocent or guilty? Some of these charges, I don't even think should be legally allowed charges at all. It's one of those things where, the government comes up with these really weird laws and charges, and they shouldn't even be charges at all. They shouldn't be illegal at all. I feel that way about some of these charges against Ian Freeman, but you listen and you decide, but it's nonetheless a very intriguing case and another example of government abuse. All right, let's move on with our sponsors before we get to our conversation tonight. Wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to get older, wrinkling skin, losing our hair, brittle nails, aches in our joints? Well, I want to tell you about Revive, the superior collagen powder that delivers real noticeable results, containing 5 types of collagen, hyaluronic acid, biotin, and vitamin C. This powerful formula works synergistically to keep you younger longer. Many collagen products on the market today simply don't deliver results, whether it's reducing aches and pains, strengthening hair and nails, or keeping your skin smooth and youthful. Revive does it all. Revive is your fountain of youth. Your skin will be more radiant with less wrinkles, and your hair will be thicker, shinier, and more luscious than ever. Experience the unmatched benefits of Revive, because feeling and looking your best starts from within. You'll see the difference in the mirror in no time. Revive is easy to mix, all natural, non-GMO, 100% made in the good old USA, and available in 2 delicious flavors. Revive, real results inside and out. Go to mybrightcore.com and get 25% off with code Kim, or call to get 50% off your entire order. Jacob, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure, Kim. Thanks for having me on.
Such a fascinating case. What's interesting about this case is it showcases how the government is able to go after people with a variety of charges that they essentially, in this case, looks like they've made up or heavily exaggerated when they basically don't like what the person is doing. You state it so well in your article. You say that Ian Freeman was outside of the statist box, basically. And because he went up against the status norm of how we're all supposed to be and how we're all supposed to behave and the money we're supposed to use and how we're supposed to live our lives, because he was different from that, they essentially went after him. And he was a player in the Bitcoin world, and they've been going after Bitcoin people. But let's break down this case, because people are going to be skeptical, right? You're saying, like, I just read what the government, what they're accusing him of, what they said he did wrong. You say he's totally innocent of all of the charges that they have charged him with. Is that right? Everything they've convicted him with and even charged him with, you say he was innocent, totally innocent.
Absolutely. Totally innocent man.
So let's break them down then, the different charges and why he would be innocent. A lot of people will be skeptical. They'll say, no. This guy did something dirty, did something wrong. So let's hear you out. What were all of he was charged with what, 11 different crimes?
Yeah, but they really boil down to 4 crimes, 4 basic crimes. And one is income tax evasion. The second one is failing to register with the federal government as a Bitcoin seller. The third one is money laundering. And the fourth one is conspiracy to launder money.
Okay.
Those are the 4 charges. Now there's various facets within each one, like various counts of income tax evasion for this year and that year. But those are the 4 basic charges.
Okay, so 4 basic charges. Some of them they expanded. Like I believe with the income tax one, it was 3 different years that they said he didn't pay income tax. So you're saying that would be 3 separate charges. So that's how it blew up to 11 different charges.
Yeah, and they started out before the trial with some fraud charges that they dropped before they went to trial. So when the jury verdict comes out, the jury finds him guilty of 4 charges: income tax evasion, failure to register, money laundering, and conspiracy to launder money. Those are the 4 charges.
Right. Okay. Let's start off with the let's start with the money laundering charge that ultimately, in your article, you said that he's no longer, well, actually, tell us first, what is he in jail for 8 years for? What specifically constitutes 8 years of prison? Is that the income tax stuff? Is that the conspiracy to launder money? Which one is it that causes 8 years?
Well, let me back up a minute here and tell you how I got into this, so that you can see the real context of what's going on here.
Okay.
That when I first heard about Ian Freeman's case, I looked into it, but on a very superficial basis. I mean, I knew he was a libertarian, and I knew that he was a very principled libertarian, that he had stood up against the state. He's had this very successful talk show called Free Talk Live. And so I thought, well, let me look at it. And so you Google Ian Freeman and criminal case, and you just come up with just a ton of articles that he's a fraudster, that he got convicted of fraud, and that it was a jury trial. Okay, well, I was a criminal defense lawyer and civil trial lawyer for 12 years. That's when I started out my life as a lawyer, trial lawyer. So when I see jury trial, I'm thinking, okay, these are regular citizens. I have the utmost respect for jury trials, and it's very difficult to find a jury that's corrupt. And so they convicted him of fraud. Well, as a libertarian, I stand against fraud. Libertarians don't approve of the initiation of force or fraud. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, well, that's it. I'm not going to look any further in this case. That's it for me. That's good enough for me. The jury found him guilty of fraud. Well, then I'm at Pork Fest, which is the annual festival there in New Hampshire, the Free State Project, and I'm giving a speech this last summer. And I talked to a friend of mine whose judgment I have the utmost confidence in, and somebody mentioned the Ian Freeman case on stage, and so I turned to my friend and I said, "What's the deal with Freeman? He got convicted of fraud. Why are they making a big case of it? A jury convicted him." He says, "It's all bogus." And I said, "Really?" And well, that intrigued me. So I started doing more research, and I found an article by Brian Doherty from Reason Magazine that was very critical of this verdict and this judgment of conviction. And I have the utmost respect for Doherty's scholarship and accuracy. So I thought, So I decided to order the whole transcript of the trial. And the transcript is a verbatim set of what happened, all the testimony that comes across. And I read through the whole thing and I'm like flabbergasted at the end of this, especially the jury verdict. The jury verdict comes back in with convictions on these 4 basic charges, none of which involve fraud.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, wait a minute, all those articles in the mainstream press, fraudster, fraud, and so forth, how'd that happen? He's not convicted of fraud. And in my article that you make reference to, that people can read at fff.org, the Future of Freedom Foundation, I detail the jury verdict.
Mm-hmm.
And the jury verdict is guilty of the 4 charges that I talked about, none of which is for fraud.
Right.
So, okay, he gets the 8
but
years.
let me just ask you real quick about that. So is that just a semantics issue? I think that, when a person thinks of a money launderer, well, I mean, I guess just what does the layman person think? Like, do they just use the term fraud for anybody who commits a money crime? I almost want to say that that's like a semantics issue, that people are just saying, oh, he's a fraudster. It's just an easy blanket term, even though he wasn't actually, to be accurate, you would say he's a money launderer, or right, you would say he's a tax evader. You would say he's a money launderer. You would say that he was the things that he was actually convicted of, right? You wouldn't say fraud, because fraud is an actual legal, a legal conviction that he was not convicted of. But do you think that's just semantics?
No, it's fundamentally different. When you commit, we're talking about separate offenses here. When you commit fraud, you are misrepresenting facts to somebody. You're making misrepresentations with the intent of stealing money from them. That's the usual definition of fraud. Or let's say you're selling a car to somebody that you say is new when it's used. You're trying to essentially take something that doesn't belong to you with a false representation.
Okay.
An income tax evasion doesn't involve fraud. You're just not paying your taxes.
Right. Okay.
Or money laundering, you're taking clean money or dirty money and you're converting it into what appears to be clean money. There's no false representations made here. You're just simply trying to launder money to make it look legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important that we recognize that these are separate crimes here, that somebody that commits tax evasion or failing to register. There's another example. You failed to register your business with the government. You haven't defrauded anybody.
Right.
You just didn't register. Same thing with money laundering. You're just laundering money. You're not. So it's a very important distinction. This guy has not been convicted of fraud, even though the government put out a press release that implies that.
Right.
After the case, it's, oh, he's a fraudster. We're not going to tolerate fraud in this world and so forth, because fraud makes it look bad. And it worked on me. That's why I didn't delve further into the case. A guy committed fraud. If they had said he got convicted of money laundering by a jury, I might have looked further into the case saying, wait a minute, because I'm real skeptical of money laundering cases anyway.
Yeah.
But once they fraud, it's very prejudicial.
Okay.
So they got to be accurate, and this U.S. Attorney's Office was not accurate when they put out that press release, which is why all the mainstream press, all those articles that you'll see, all refer to fraud, or most of them do. And I should mention that this is a U.S. Attorney's Office that has problems with ethics. They got reprimanded, or at least one attorney in their office got reprimanded by the chief judge of the First Circuit in that district for unethical conduct and repeated unethical conduct. So this is an office that has problems in this area. All right, but let's take the reason he gets the 8 years is because of the money laundering aspects here. The failing to register, the tax evasion, minor stuff. And it's clear they were minor because they had an IRS agent investigating Ian for about a year. And so clearly they could have just gone ahead and indicted him for failing to register, failure to pay his taxes, and they would have had him on those charges. So it was clear that was not sufficient for them, because let's deal first with the money laundering charge. Now,
okay.
We've got a money laundering charge. We've got a conspiracy to launder money charge. Two separate charges here.
Mhm.
They're related, but they're two separate charges.
Yeah.
The money laundering charge is really the heart of this case. It's almost, it's incredible. I found it shocking when I was reading the transcript and realized what the government had done. They get this IRS agent who's undercover, operating undercover. His name was Pavel Prolotsky or something like that. And he approaches Ian and investigates him for a year. Okay, so
Well,
he
let's first,
doesn't.
but before you get to that, tell us what Ian did, like what his business was.
Okay, Ian is his primary business is advocating liberty, individual liberty, free markets, libertarianism. He's got Free Talk Live and stuff. In the process, and he's very successful, and he stands up against the state. I mean, he does things that irritate the state. But in the process of doing this, he the concept of Bitcoin comes into existence. I mean, this guy, nobody really knows who the inventor is. It was a guy named Satoshi Yamamoto or
Yeah,
something like that,
right.
that invents Bitcoin as a way to preserve people's financial privacy.
Hmm.
Because as we all know, the banks have destroyed, I mean, the government has destroyed financial privacy. The banks have this know your customer business. They've essentially turned into snitches for the government. If they
Right.
see anything unusual or suspicious, they have to snitch on their customers. And you've got these ridiculous requirements that if you're carrying $10,000 out of the country or into the country, you have to report it. And they destroyed financial privacy. So Bitcoin comes along, and it's a way to avoid the government's monitoring what you're doing with your money. And
Hmm.
immediately everybody sees the threat here in the federal government. And Ian sees the preservation of financial privacy through Bitcoin. It's a way to avoid government monitoring what you're doing. And Ian sees this immediately. He's one of the real pioneers that was able to recognize this from the very beginning. So he decides that he's going to go into the Bitcoin selling business. Not as a way to make money, because nobody dreamed that you could become a millionaire owning Bitcoins, even small
Hmm.
amounts of Bitcoins. He did it as a way to show people there's a way you can preserve your financial privacy here, and it's something called Bitcoin. He becomes a pioneer in the very beginning of Bitcoin, when Bitcoin was selling for zero. It was essentially a free thing. And he starts promoting it, advertising it, educating people on it there in New Hampshire. And even sets up a Bitcoin selling business where he's going to sell Bitcoins, not as a way to make money, but as a
Right.
way to give people protection. He
Sure.
even has kiosks where people can go into stores and buy Bitcoins, just like a vending machine. He made people a lot of money. That wasn't his goal, but when Bitcoin soared in value, there were
Yeah.
people that became millionaires
Yeah.
overnight. So that's what he was doing, and that's what caught the more of the attention from government. I think they hated Ian anyway because of what his life was dedicated to,
They
which is against
particularly
this
hate
whole.
Bitcoin. They really hate
Oh, that.
Bitcoin.
Oh,
So
they. They
they
hate
don't
it from the
know.
beginning.
Right. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to classify it. They don't know how to regulate it. They don't know what to do with it. And what we keep hearing in the government over and over, and I think this plays into the fraud, the fraud moniker that Ian has, is they've just been saying, "Oh, all crypto is a way for criminals to transact. It's money for criminals. It's a transaction, currency for criminals, and so we have to crack down on it because this is just what the criminals are using." So that's their narrative, even though the vast majority of people using cryptocurrency are not criminals. We now have countries using cryptocurrency, like El Salvador as an official currency. We have, lots of big businesses that are accepting payments in crypto. Yet the government is still very much attached to the idea that crypto is for criminals. So so they see Ian and he's got this crypto business and they're thinking crypto is for criminals. So here, this must be a criminal. So we're going to start investigating him. That's what they've decided to do. So tell us about. So then they get this. You say IRS undercover guy. Gosh, what is that like? So this guy just walk in and say, "Hey, I'm a customer," and just befriends him for a year and acts like he's a good customer for a year, and he's really an IRS undercover agent. Ugh.
Yes, yes, and I should mention that when you talk about criminal conduct, the big criminal conduct in all this is the drug war. and we don't need to digress into that area, but it's worth pointing out that most of this financial privacy violations and assaults and bank secrecy laws and all this are all rooted in trying to win the drug war.
Yeah.
We're going to eliminate the $1,000 bill so that they can't accumulate large amounts of $100 bills and so forth. So it's all rooted in the drug war. But so yeah, they bring this IRS agent because that's always the standby violation. When they can't get anybody on anything else, there's always income tax violations.
Right. There's always
you got an IRS code that's 10
yeah.
inches thick, and
right.
they can get you on something.
Yeah.
So they're clearly targeting him because of what you're saying. They see Bitcoin as this is a criminal thing. This is a horrible thing. Well, even if people are using Bitcoin for criminal conduct, the notion that innocent people have a right to keep their affairs private from the government is anathema to them. They don't want anybody to be kept their financial affairs private. They want to monitor everybody because that's a means of control. So this guy investigates Ian for a year, but befriends him, says, I'm your buddy. I'm a libertarian. He goes to libertarian meetings to say, I'm one of you guys. And finally, when obviously the income tax charge and the failure to register charge is not enough. It's clearly not enough because of what this guy does. He happens to mention at a party, a libertarian party, like a social gathering, that he's a drug dealer. And he does this on purpose in Ian's hearing. He doesn't say it directly to him, but he wants to make sure that Ian hears this. And Ian does hear it. And he turns to the guy and he says, you shouldn't have said that, because now I'm not going to sell Bitcoins to you anymore. Now, I should mention, this guy's been using taxpayer money to buy thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoins from Ian, making like a good customer.
Yeah.
And the guy says, oh, wait a minute. No, I've got lots of friends, well-heeled, wealthy friends. We're ready to buy large amounts from you. So he was trying to tempt him with money.
Right.
And Ian is a smart guy. He says, nope, you have put me on notice that you're a drug dealer and I'm not selling Bitcoin. I mean, Ian knows that this is not a good thing to be selling Bitcoin to a drug dealer. He knows what the feds would do to him. And so the guy says, well, wait a minute now, what about your kiosks? Unmanned kiosks, because he's hoping Ian would say something like, oh, well, I won't know what you're doing there, so you can go ahead and do that. But Ian says, no, you don't have authority to use my kiosk. I don't give you that authority. I don't care if they're manned or not manned. You are not to use my kiosk.
But of course the guy could. I mean, these are unmanned kiosks. So even though Ian is saying to him, I'm not letting you use them, the guy could still walk in and use a kiosk, right? I mean, but are you saying that in the court testimony, this undercover IRS agent, when he gave his testimony, he actually said Ian told him, I'm not doing business with you anymore, and no, I don't want you using my kiosks either?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
He acknowledged it. But what the guy did was he went and used the kiosk anyway.
Okay, right.
He bought $19,000 worth of Bitcoins using taxpayer money, of course.
Yeah.
And then he goes to the prosecutor's office there in New Hampshire, federal prosecutor's, U.S. Attorney's office, and says, we got him. He has just sold Bitcoins to a guy that he knows is a drug dealer, despite the fact that Ian didn't authorize the guy or monitor the guy or approve the guy buying these Bitcoins from this kiosk. That's what they went after him on. That's the money laundering charge. That he's laundering money for a guy that really isn't even a drug dealer. But it's a guy who's acting like he's a drug dealer.
So the government in this instance is basically mad that there's a kiosk that's set up for people to, anybody at all could go up to the kiosk and buy Bitcoin. And they're basically punishing Ian for one, there's no crime in setting up this kiosk itself, right? So this is the issue with the government and with Bitcoin. They haven't gone through and actually set up any regulation or any laws. They haven't actually done anything in relation to cryptocurrency. They talk about it. They talk about how it needs to be regulated, but they don't really know how to regulate it yet. They haven't figured it out. So clearly they're mad that there's this kiosk and this ability to people to go and actually get crypto out of the kiosk. And so they've figured out this weird workaround in order to punish Ian, to teach him some sort of a lesson because it's not actually illegal to have the kiosk, but they're basically saying in this instance, but it is illegal because if somebody uses your kiosk for nefarious reasons and you don't even know about it, you're still criminally liable because a criminal decided to go and use your kiosk. So therefore, you shouldn't even have the kiosk. I mean, that's the lesson they're trying to teach.
Yeah, but it goes much broader than the kiosk. They don't like the fact that he's selling Bitcoin.
Right, in
Remember, he's
general.
selling
But in this
Bitcoin.
case, any other person who's in the crypto business would say, well, shoot, I better not set up a kiosk because if I set up a kiosk, then what happened to Ian Free? I mean, they're trying to create a chilling effect, right? So then that way a
Absolutely.
person says, I better be careful and I better know. And this is where it gets really weird. So this is the part of this. So with money laundering charges, and I didn't know this until I read your article. And I have a fundamental problem with this, and I have to think more through this, but I don't understand why it's my responsibility to care about what you're using your money for or how you made your money. Why would I be charged with money laundering if I have a business, I'm not laundering any money. I have a legitimate business. You tell me you're a drug dealer. I don't know why Ian would even have to say that why he would have to say, well, then I no longer want to do business with you. I mean, I'm almost like, maybe I'm too libertarian for my own good. I don't know. I would just, I feel like that's your business. If you want to commit a crime and if the government comes after you, that's on you. And now that you've told me, if they come and ask me, then I'm going to tell them what you told me. I mean, it wasn't wise for you to do this, but I don't know why I would have to stop doing business with that person. I could understand on a moral or an ethical decision for me personally why I might not want to do business with certain people who engage in certain whatever, but that's my own personal choice. I don't know why it's a crime for a person to, like, had Ian said, "Oh, okay, you're a drug dealer. Well, I guess we're not going to really be that good of friends." But why is that a crime? Does
I
that make
couldn't
sense?
agree with you more. Oh,
Yeah.
it
Okay.
makes total sense. I am so glad you homed in on that because you are so right. I mean, take a gold dealer, sells gold coins, Krugerrands or whatever, and St. Gaudens or whatever, and a drug dealer comes in and says, "I'm a drug dealer. I want to buy some gold from you, gold coins from you." What's wrong with that? I mean, why can't the gold dealer sell his gold coins to this guy just because he happens to be a drug dealer? That's his business. It's the same with
Right.
bitcoins.
Yeah.
What
Well,
they
for
what
anything, but
they've
that's my
done,
point. It's for
it's anything.
any money. I don't understand why it's my responsibility. I'm not transacting, I'm not buying the drugs. I'm not committing a crime. How do I know the person's even not, like in the case of this IRS agent, he was lying. He's not actually a drug dealer. That was a lie. So why then would it be a crime? How do I know? I mean, people are crazy. They say crazy things all the time. If I'm operating a business and somebody walks in and wants to buy something from me and they tell me that they're God or the devil himself, or they tell me, I mean, they could tell me they're Zeus, they could tell me all kinds of crazy things. Am I supposed to sit there and say, well, now that you've said that, I can't do business with you, Satan? I mean, that I don't understand. People say things. If I didn't witness the crime or actually participate in the crime, I don't know how I'm criminally liable. But apparently that's so now, and I learned that from reading your article. I didn't know that I'm not allowed to transact with known criminals, that if they tell me they're a criminal, and I don't even know what the scope of that is. Is it only if I'm selling them a form of money, whether it be gold or crypto, or can I not even offer them any services whatsoever in my business? Can I not sell them a cake? Can I not, like, at what point am I aiding in it? Like, for example, not a cake, but let's say a better example. If I know you're a drug dealer or you're making drugs even, and I work at a drug store, like a pharmacy, and I sell you, knowing you do this, and I sell you supplies, like you come in and you buy thermometers and mixing spoons, and am I now an accomplice in your crime? Am I a conspirator in that case?
Well, yeah, that would be the logical reasoning. But you see, where they go off on the Bitcoin thing is with the money laundering concept, which I
Right.
think is a really weird
So the
concept.
concept
That
itself you think is bad, no matter, even if they,
Oh,
because I
absolutely.
don't think I should be a co-conspirator for anybody if I'm just doing legitimate business, even if I know they might be doing something illegal with whatever it is I sell them. whether it be the money or mixing spoons, I don't know how a person is criminally liable in that case, but apparently they are. We all have to be leery of this, apparently. We all have to know each other's business, apparently, and find out what the person is doing really so that we're not implicated in their crime. But you're also saying, in addition to that, because that's my thinking, I just don't know why a person would be liable for that unless they wanted to actually aid and abet in the actual crime. You're saying, on top of that, though, the money laundering itself shouldn't even be a crime. Like, this is a weird crime
That's
for anybody.
it's the money laundering concept that enables them to do what you're talking about. In other words, if you're a grocery store owner and a drug dealer comes up and says, I'm here are my groceries, I want to check out, and I'm using my money that I made from the drug business to buy these groceries.
Right.
Yes, that grocery store owner is now at risk because but it's because of the laundering concept. He's helping launder that dirty money, that drug money, and make it legitimate by giving the guy legitimate things like drugs.
Like if they bought gift cards. So if they go into a grocery store and buy a bunch of gift cards, that would be considered money laundering if the clerk knew that the person had received their money through crime. You got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me.
And that's why you have all the paranoia in the banking industry. That when somebody comes in with a large amount of cash, all the alarm bells go off. Oh my gosh, I got to report you. I got to know your customer business, because it could be drug money that's being converted into clean, legitimate money by making a bank deposit there.
Is there any instance of money laundering that you could say, okay, yeah, this is a clear-cut case of bad money laundering that should be considered criminal?
I can't think of anything.
Really?
Well, you see, my problem, I'm like Ian, is that I got no problem with Ian selling Bitcoin to a drug dealer.
Right.
I mean, I don't believe in drug laws. And so the only reason you've got drug lords and illegitimate drug dealers anyway is because of the drug war.
Sure.
But once the government makes it illegal and you get this black market and you get these drug lords and drug cartels, so they go in there and deposit money in a bank, and why should I care about that? I mean, they're not doing anything to me, and they're not initiating force against anybody. If you want to put them out of business, legalize drugs. But instead, what they do is they have this money laundering statute that says we're now going to go after anybody that has the appearance of participating in this drug business, which are banks or Bitcoin sellers, or, as you point out, a grocery store seller.
Sure. Yeah, I just read a story. I don't remember which bank it was, but a big bank just recently got hit with, just like yesterday or the day before, got hit with these massive amount of fines for, I mean, this is what they're accusing them of. They're basically saying to the bank, you allowed like cartels to use your bank, or you allowed these nefarious organizations or people, and you didn't ask enough questions. I mean, that's literally what they're saying to the bank is, you didn't do your due diligence in asking them enough questions to find out where their money came from before they deposited it in your bank. And it turned out that their money came from bad places. And so you as the bank are responsible. I don't understand that concept at all. I just think it's none of my bank's business. It's none of their business where I got my money. They shouldn't ask a single question. And it also shouldn't be their responsibility. Right? Just like a cell phone company. It's not the cell phone company's responsibility to find out who I'm going to be calling. And if I'm going to be committing crime with the cell phone, I don't want them in my business like this. So that's what fundamentally, this whole concept that apparently the government has set up, which is now the know your customer concept, which you were talking about, how you are now required to know that this person got their money through some nefarious way. They're then laundering it through your institution or through your services. And now you're responsible. I mean, this is just bull in my mind. How is that even... it's insane.
I read about that case where they fined this bank millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, because they have supposedly been laundering money. I mean, why should they have the responsibility of delving into what people are doing in their banks? And again, it's all this, how are we going to wage the war on drugs if we're not monitoring all this? Well, I don't see them winning the war on drugs. It's just greater infringements on privacy that accomplish nothing except they enable the government to steal money from banks. I mean, this is a large fine that they imposed on this bank.
Yeah.
Maybe it helps them with their government spending problems.
Okay,
But
it was this
it
one. I
all
just found the
revolves
case.
around this.
Right. Okay. So it was TD Bank, and they just recently got hit with $3 billion penalty in U.S.
Yeah.
money laundering settlement. And they said that it was over drug cartel money laundering. I mean, they
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
said to the bank, it literally says right here, they have to pay $3 billion to settle charges that it failed to properly monitor money laundering by drug cartels. So they didn't ask
Yeah.
these questions of their customers. Where did you get this money? I mean, that's crazy to think that the bank is responsible for finding out where you got your money and what you're going to do with your money. And
Yeah.
and that's also this then plays into the rest of the charges against Ian when it comes to the love issue, what is it, the Lonely Hearts Club issue. So let's get into that. So the first one was the money laundering. He didn't really launder the money. The guy went to a kiosk, spent $19,000, even says in court, he told me not to. I did it anyway, but the fact I was able to do it, that's money laundering. And a jury actually convicted him on that. But then later a judge said, what happened with that? Because I know that one was thrown out, wasn't it? That got
Yeah,
overturned.
that the presiding judge, much to his credit, said he can issue what's called a judgment of acquittal, notwithstanding the jury verdict. And as we all know, the jury verdict's final. The judge can't tamper with that, and the appellate courts can't tamper with a jury verdict, except in one instance. If the judge finds there's no evidence whatsoever to sustain the verdict, he can throw it out. And that's what he found in this case. There's no evidence of guilt here at all. He really shouldn't have
Right.
even let it go to the jury.
Right.
But to his
Why
credit, he issues a judgment of acquittal.
why do you think the jury convicted him on that? What instructions were given to the jury that made them say, "Yeah, I guess he did it"?
Well, this goes into the Lonely Hearts Club issue. Um,
Was
that,
he
that
because
remember,
was he convicted of both of these, all of these at the same time by the same jury?
yes,
Okay.
yes, these four
So
charges:
all
money
okay.
laundering, conspiracy to launder money, the income tax evasion, the failure to register, the
All the
same
same
judge,
jury.
same jury
Okay.
at the
So then
same
the
time.
judge ultimately says, "All right, well, the money laundering charge wasn't, legitimate because he didn't actually launder any money, so we can't actually convict him of a crime he literally did not commit," right? So
Yeah, the
they
jury made a
ultimately
mistake. In other words,
mhm. How many years
juries
would he
make
have
mistakes.
gotten had that charge stuck? How many years would he have gotten?
He would have gotten the 8 because the charge did not stick. The judge threw it out and then sentenced him to 8 years in the penitentiary on the other 3 charges.
Okay, okay. But I'm just saying,
The conspiracy,
would there have been more? Would there have been a longer sentence had that not been
oh,
thrown out?
possibly,
Okay,
very possibly, very
okay,
possibly.
okay.
Not
So let's go
necessarily, but possibly.
now. Let's go to the conspiracy to launder money. So this is a different case. This is the case that they talk about in this press release that I read earlier from with him being charged, with him being convicted of the money laundering. They go into this, and it sounds very terrible. I mean, look, it's terrible that these older people who are lonely in their 60s and 70s, looking for love online, and they think they find it, they think it's real. And this person then says, "Oh, I got a problem. I need money. Help me out, honey." And the old person, naively gives them money. And that is a terrible, sad fraud. That is fraud, right? Because the person doesn't really love them. They're just out for the money. They probably have a girlfriend or boyfriend on the side, or even married, and they're working together, colluding on this, and working multiple people. And it's a terrible case of fraud. That is, people don't like hearing about vulnerable people having so much money taken from them, and that's what they really are calling him the fraudster over, and what they're really claiming, oh, this is what he did wrong, is he worked. They're claiming, and then you can clarify, that he essentially, well, their claim is kind of funny. They don't really fully claim that he worked with these people. They're not saying he worked with them to commit this fraud against these older people who gave their money away, but they're saying he set up a business that fraudsters used in order to get money from these lonely heart people. So tell us,
Exactly.
so explain this
Yeah.
this this one and how he got convicted of this.
Okay, it's complex, so I have to boil it down to its really basics here. He's charged with a conspiracy to launder money. We're setting aside the laundering money one because the judge already acquitted him of that one. We're setting aside the other two ones, the income tax and failure to register.
Right.
Set all those three aside.
Yeah.
We're left now with really the basic substantive charge here: conspiracy to launder money.
Okay.
Not laundering money, conspiracy to launder money.
Sure.
A conspiracy means that they have to prove an agreement, a conspiracy. That's what a conspiracy is. It's an agreement between two or more people to commit a crime. And that's all they have to prove, plus what the law calls an overt act to further the conspiracy. But the basic thing they have to prove is the agreement to launder money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is where they got problems, you see, that they cannot prove that he entered into a conspiracy with somebody to launder money. So to overcome that problem, because who did he agree with to launder money? I mean, okay, to overcome this problem, they bring up these scams, these romance scams, what I call the Lonely Hearts Club. So you're right. There's people that are in their 60s and 70s. They've lost their spouse. Let's say a lady that is longing for love. She's lonely. She goes on the internet and she falls in love on the internet. Now, I would assume that there are people that find love on the internet. I mean, we know that, dating clubs and so
right.
forth. But some of them are just scammers. They're over there saying, "I love you, darling. You're everything I've ever wanted." And then they lure them along over a period of a year or so, and they say, "Honey, I need money. I know we haven't met personally, but you can see my picture, and we love each other. Can you send me money?" And so the little old lady says, "Yes, I want to help you." And so she goes to her bank and says, "Please wire these funds to Ian, who's a Bitcoin seller." Or they'll disguise that. A lot of times they'll disguise it because banks get all their alarms up when you say Bitcoin.
Right.
And so they buy Bitcoins from Ian and they say, "Put the Bitcoins in my lover's wallet there." So they're essentially buying the Bitcoins and giving them to the scammer.
But they don't really say it like that. I mean, if I were going to do this, right, I wouldn't say to Ian, I wouldn't tell him, "Oh, put this in my lover's crypto wallet." I would say, "Here's the wallet address that I want you to deposit it into." Right?
Yeah, I'm just giving you that.
Don't ask me questions.
The,
yeah. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
But yes. But I mean, a normal
All they're
person
doing
this normal transaction, I would go to my bank, I would get my money, I would then, or figure out a way to pay Ian. And then I would say, "Oh, and my lover would, of course, give me the crypto wallet address." I would give that to Ian and say, "Please deposit it here." And that would be the end of it. I wouldn't have to tell anybody anything.
Oh, well, you wouldn't want to tell anybody anything.
Right.
You have to keep it all secret because,
of course, it's embarrassing.
Because the bank, remember, bank know your, well, it's embarrassing, but also bank know your customer problems. If the bank knows that you're over there going to send it to an online lover, they're going to say, "Oh, now wait a minute, we're not sure we're going to let you wire your funds out here." And the same with Ian. You can't be honest with Ian and say, "Well, this is for my online lover," because Ian himself would try to take precautions not to help people get scammed.
Yeah.
Because Ian's business is based on ratings online, like a lot of businesses, Uber and everything. You get rated by your customers. If you get bad ratings, you're going to lose business.
Sure.
So Ian's there saying, "I'm trying to protect my customers too because I want good feedback and good ratings." What the government says is, well, okay, we're not going to go after the bank, even though the bank has facilitated this. They're obviously know your customer didn't work because the customers are wiring their funds to Ian. But they say, "Oh, Ian's a convenient target because, oh, by the way, we don't like Ian Freeman anyway because he's a libertarian Bitcoin seller.
Right.
So we're going to charge him as being part of this fraud." Now, it's clear fraud, as you had indicated. The scammer is defrauding the person by saying, "I love you," and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But they're saying Ian's part of this, even though they don't charge or convict him of fraud. But this is what swayed the jury. Yes, how did the jury go on this? Because the jury felt these pangs of suffering, empathy for these people who had gotten scammed. The judge should never have let this evidence in because Ian was never charged with fraud or conspiracy to defraud.
Did Ian know how many of these fraudulent cases did they bring forward as evidence? Like how many of these I should say different fraudsters. So was it like one fraudster that happened to be using Ian's services over and over and over again, and they're kind of saying you should have known that this guy was frauding these old ladies? Or was it numerous and they just got them on all of them and they were like, well, as many as we can find? Or like, does that make sense? My
It
question.
Yeah, yeah. It was as many as they could find. I forget how many witnesses they presented at trial, maybe 6 or 7, 5 or 6, something like that.
Uh-huh.
But what's interesting is how they found out about these people. You see, these people didn't go and file complaints. They could have sued Ian, but nobody sues Ian because Ian didn't do anything wrong.
He didn't
He
know that
wasn't
this is what was
aware.
going on. Right.
Exactly. And he was trying to protect against it. But you see, the the little old lady knew that if they told Ian the truth, Ian would say, "Well, no, wait a minute, I'm not going to participate in this." Just like he didn't participate with the
The drugs.
IRS
Yeah.
guy.
Right.
And so they go in there and they say, "We just want to buy bitcoins from you." Okay, but Ian had his own know your customer protections where he would ask them questions, "What's this about?" and so forth. Well, when they raided Ian and we're going to charge him with these income tax violations or failure to register, they went through his computer. And
Hmm.
although this is not certain, it's almost certain that by going through the computer, they found these people who had gotten defrauded. They contacted them and said, "Oh, would you come and help us convict Ian Freeman? Because he was part of your being defrauded." And these people, some of them lost everything. They lost their entire retirement that their spouse had left them and so forth. Pretty tragic cases. But they were easily convinced that, hey, if you come and help us convict Ian, that the scammer, they could never find out who the scammer was. That's the whole idea of Bitcoin. It protects the identity of the scammer. But Ian was this very likely target, very easy target. And so the people who got scammed said, "Oh yeah, we'll come and help you convict
What?
Ian." As if he's this super bad guy. He has done nothing wrong at
Wait,
all.
wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. They never found how, so they never found the scammers themselves.
Right. Because that's the whole idea of
How could
Bitcoin. It
they,
protects people in
right,
that
how could they
world.
have never found the scammers, yet then charge Ian with a conspiracy with the scammer if they haven't actually found the scammer to prove a conspiracy? They would have to be conspiring, right, to defraud these people. They couldn't find for the fraud. So that would have been for the fraud. But so he didn't get charged with fraud because if they would have found the scammer and then they would have interviewed the scammer or went through the scammer's records, maybe they would find some interaction, right? That would to me be the crime. If the scammer hits up Ian and says, "Yeah, man, I got this thing going on and I got all these ladies and they're going to send me a bunch of money. I'm going to send them through you. Cool." And then Ian says, "Yeah, great. Send them through me and I'll help you get your money." They never found these conversations. They never found these scammers at all, you're saying. So the only thing that they could get Ian on was conspiracy to launder money, which how do you conspire? It sounded to me like, because what that how do you I mean, they're saying that it did happen, that the laundering of the money happened, right? So how could you conspire to launder without actually laundering when these people lost all their money?
You're starting to see why this guy's innocent. That they couldn't, you see, they had charged him with fraud before trial, but as they go to trial, they drop the charges, the fraud charges. And the reason they had to drop the fraud charges is because they couldn't prove that Ian conspired with the
With anybody.
scammers,
Right, right.
with
Because they never
anybody.
could find the scammers. Okay. So they couldn't find the
Right.
scammers. So they find
And
Ian and they're like, "Well, you deposited money in the scammers' wallets from these little old ladies. So you then, but there's no fraud there."
there's
Well,
no
this is so
fraud there, you
stupid.
see?
Right. So then
Oh,
how does he
exactly.
get, so then tell me, how is it conspiracy? So if they could get him on money laundering, or at least they tried for the drug thing, right? That is where money actually came out of the kiosk machine, got into the Bitcoin wallet by a drug dealer, via a drug dealer putting their bad money in. How do they get conspiring to launder money when these ladies actually lost their money? I mean, I could understand, because conspiracy to me has always been the crime didn't actually get committed, but you were going to do it, but you didn't actually do it. Is that what conspiracy is compared to the actual, right? So it's
Exactly.
just
It's an
you
agreement
talked
to
about
commit the
it,
crime.
Right. You agreed to commit the crime, you talked about it, and you took an extra step of, like if I said to you, I'm going to kill my neighbor tomorrow, and you're like, all right, let's do it. And then you went off to the store and bought the rope. Right. Then now we've got but then nothing happened. Then I changed my mind. You change your mind. Nonetheless, we still have, or if the cops find out or something, that's conspiracy. Right. That's not, but because we didn't go through with it, but it was a conspiracy.
Right. You're still guilty, even though you've dropped it immediately the next day. You
You're
bought the
still,
rope, and then you
yeah.
said that you are guilty of conspiracy.
Okay.
All right. So they can't get him on conspiracy to defraud because they got no agreement
Sure.
between him and the scammers.
Well, then
So
why
they say,
couldn't they get him
okay,
on but what I'm asking is why could they get him on conspiracy to launder money and not on actually laundering money when the actual money has left the ladies' banks? Like it's gone. It's not that we thought about it and then we didn't go through with it. No, it happened. So how is that not laundering money versus why is it conspiracy only?
okay. Well, they could have charged him along the lines. You're very astute to pick that up. They charged him with laundering with respect to the IRS agent.
Right,
They
right.
got thrown
But why
out.
not with this?
They could have charged him with laundering the money to send to the scammers. They didn't do that for some reason. So you're very astute to pick up on that. They did not charge him with that. They charged him, and they could have charged him with that and conspiracy to launder money. What they ended up doing is charging him only with conspiracy to launder money with respect to these scammers. Now, when you launder, the laundering money concept is very bizarre, but
Yeah.
but the basic idea is you're taking dirty money, drug money, for example, and you're trying to clean it. You're laundering it by making it legitimate. So you've seen this on TV programs. I forget that drug war movie that was so great, where the family in the Ozarks, Ozark, I think was the name of it. And their job was to launder money for the drug cartels. And so what you're trying to do is figure out, okay, you got $10 million of drug money. Let's go buy this business and make it look like the business is generating this huge amount of money. And so you've taken dirty money, drug money, and you've cleaned it. It's legitimate now. You can now deposit it in banks. It's not coming from drug sales. It's coming from your grocery store that you've opened with your drug money. All right.
Sure.
So, but the assumption is you've got dirty money that you're cleaning.
Right.
There is no dirty money here. When somebody is buying a Bitcoin, it's not dirty. The money is totally clean. It's retirement money.
Well, right, from these old ladies, not from the drug dealer guy, but from the old ladies. Their money's legitimate. They weren't drug dealers. They weren't doing anything. So that's their money. It's not dirty money at this point. It's clean money. Okay.
Exactly. It's clean money.
They're buying
gold
Bitcoin
coins, or buying Bitcoins, or they're buying
clean
whatever.
money. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And they're taking money from a bank, which is clean money.
Right.
They're buying the Bitcoins.
Sure. Okay. So there's no laundering that's happened.
There's no laundering. It's
Right.
just a sale of a Bitcoin.
Right.
So the little old lady is saying, deposit this money, clean money that I'm sending you, into this wallet, Bitcoin wallet. Ian's just following instructions. It's their money. They have a right to do what they want with their money. They deposit it into the scammer's wallet. It's still clean. Up to that moment, it's clean money.
Right.
What
the fraudster do? Yeah. Then when they take the money and they decide to funnel it through something, then that's when the laundering happens.
Exactly.
So then they should have got him on for this. It would be like fraud, like actual defrauding these old ladies, or conspiracy to commit fraud. Although it seems like it would be fraud because they actually did lose the money, but they couldn't get him on fraud because they couldn't actually find the scammers or prove that there was any sort of knowledge between Ian and these scammers, that Ian even knew what these scammers were doing. He was just the middleman buying, and so he was just selling Bitcoin to people and didn't ask enough questions is basically what they're. So why didn't they get, so then why wouldn't they get him? How could they have got him on money? I mean, you've just clearly laid out how this is not money laundering, even if he was nefarious, even if it was, he knew and it was sinister, and it's still not laundering yet, because it would have to get to the fraudster, and then the fraudster would have to go back to Ian, buy more Bitcoin with that money to put it somewhere else in order for it to be money laundering at that point. Right. So it's only laundering.
Ian would have to know that this whole thing was going on and that he was part
on
of
top of it.
This,
right. He'd have to know
he's involved with the scammers.
Okay. So it would have been laundering had the old lady not been involved at all. But the scammer goes to Ian and says, I got all this money off these old ladies. Yeah, I made them think that I loved them and I got all this money. And so now I want to buy I want to buy Bitcoin with all this money I have and put it in my wallet. That would have been the
No,
laundering.
I want them to do it. Help me get them to send money to you to buy the Bitcoin so it can be put in my wallet.
Well,
If the
that still
scammer
wouldn't
tells us
be, well, that would have been the fraud. That wouldn't have been money
that
laundering
would have
yet
been the fraud.
still.
There wouldn't be
Right.
money
But I
laundering.
mean, it
No,
would have been
absolutely.
laundering had the fraudster
Absolutely.
already had the money, went to Ian and said, I got
Absolutely.
this money off of these old ladies. So now I want to deposit the money. I want to buy Bitcoin with my dirty money. That would have been
Exactly.
laundering had Ian known about
Exactly.
it and actually done it, which I
Exactly.
still don't think should be a crime because that's like none of my business where you got your money. And you could be lying to me and it's, whatever, that's on you, but it's a crime apparently. So everybody watch out. Okay, so that would have been laundering. Otherwise, it seems like had he been involved with these scammers and understood what was going on to these little old ladies, that would have been a fraud charge, but they never actually charged him with any fraud. But they called him a fraudster, but they never charged him with any fraud.
Not at trial. They had before they dropped the charges. And they dropped the charges because they knew they didn't have any evidence of fraud.
Right.
That
They
he had
just,
committed fraud.
okay.
So you're starting to see why I'm reading this transcript and saying, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But the whole thing, the way they bamboozled the jury, and they had great lawyers. They had 3 lawyers from the prosecution against 1 lawyer for Ian. And one of the prosecutors was so brilliant. I read his jury argument and I was stunned. I mean, this is one of the most brilliant jury arguments I have ever come across in criminal law, which is brilliant. And to prove how brilliant this guy was, and as I'm reading this, I'm saying, my gosh, what's the defense attorney going to do here?
Right.
And I don't think the defense attorney even came close to matching his jury argument. And to show you how brilliant this guy is, he got nominated and confirmed to the First Circuit Court of Appeals after this case. Now that's very unusual because he's an assistant U.S. attorney that gets elevated not to the district court level, but to the appellate court level. They jumped over all the district judges and put him in. This is how brilliant this guy was. But that's what they did. They bamboozled the jury and they also bamboozled the judge with all of this lonely heart stuff. Everybody got sidetracked with over all these women and men also losing millions of dollars to the scammers, that became the dominant part of the trial. And that's what enabled them to get these convictions.
Yeah. Sympathy. It was all of the sadness and the sympathy and the heart-wrenching stories that caused people to say, all right, this guy's guilty for having a business that these fraudsters were able to use ultimately. And that's what the government keeps saying about Bitcoin. They keep saying over and over, well, and I'm like, this is a dumb argument because that's money in general. I mean, they say people are using Bitcoin to commit crime. They're using these they're buying Bitcoins because they're drug dealers or they're traffickers or they're doing all these crimes. It's like, well, that's all money. That's what money. I mean, you could say that about cash money and which is what they're trying to do, how they're trying to move us to CBDCs, right? They're trying to move us to digital currency because they make the claim that cash is used for nefarious purposes. People are committing crimes using cash. It's under the table. It's untraceable. They don't like it. They don't like crypto for the same reason. They're trying to crack down on all of it. And they're trying to move us to this digital currency that they can trace. And that's fundamentally what it sounds like is going on here. So they got him on these. I mean, this is insane that they could go after a person. They don't like your business, so they go after you for a criminal using your business, even though you didn't know the criminal was using your business, or even when you said, I don't want that criminal using my business, they still went after him.
That's really an excellent way of putting it, because essentially the scammers are in the same position as the IRS agent. That Ian is saying, I will not participate in this once you put me on notice.
Right.
But he was never put on notice that these scams were taking place, just like on the drug deal thing.
But they're saying to him, like what they're saying to TD Bank, you should have known. It was your responsibility to know. You should have asked all these questions. You should have known. And because you didn't know, you failed. And that right there is so dystopian. People should not be okay with that. That you should not be okay with the government saying that the bank needs to know your business.
Well, also your phraseology is so astute when you say should have known. In the criminal law, we punish people for a mental state where they're consciously committing a crime. the phrase should have known, and that's a perfect phrase because that's what they're going after him. You should have known. That's a civil concept. That's negligence.
Right. Well, that's
It's
why
not
they
a
fined
criminal
TD Bank.
concept.
Well, and that's I was curious about, and I actually went over this case with my husband last night, who's an attorney, and I was like, "What do you think of this?" And he says, "Well, they should have just fined him. I mean, that's what you do." He's like, "If they're going to categorize him as a bank, essentially that's what they're doing. They're basically saying, and this goes into the other charge of you failed to register." Right, with the government, because they basically wanted to register his crypto business as like a bank, even though there's a lot of dispute on whether or not crypto there's no regulation on that yet. They haven't figured this one out. But nonetheless, it sounds like the government was saying to him, well, you should have been a bank. We think you're like a bank, so you should have been registered basically as a bank. And you should have handled your business in the way that we force banks to handle business, which is the know your customer, know what's going on. Well, TD Bank just got hit with a $3 billion fine, but nobody's going to jail. Nobody's in prison for the bank allowing cartels who are committing all kinds of worse crimes than just than getting money from old ladies. They're committing sex trafficking, rape, drug, murders, all these things, right? And yet TD Bank, nobody goes to jail. They just got hit with a fine. So if that's how they're going to play, why don't they just hit them with a fine? And not, this would be a civil case, right? Like you said.
No, it's a big difference here. TD Bank went ahead and pled guilty or admitted the charges, and therefore they give them a sweetheart deal with quote.
I don't think it was criminal though. I don't think that they took that to criminal court. I think that was with TD Bank. So you're thinking, okay, so they just went to him and said, okay.
Well, they go after him civilly, but they could have gone after him criminally. I mean, based on the same principles that you should have known.
Right.
But Ian, I don't know what the plea bargain offers were, but I think everybody understood that in federal court, they always charge you with a lot of crimes in the hopes that you'll plead guilty to one crime and serve some time, and they get you out of the Bitcoin business. And Ian just said, I'm not going to play that game. Ian Freeman says, I'm not pleading out at all.
I want to actually read this from your article, because what you're getting into right now, I think, is a really poignant point that relates to everybody. Now, most people are not going to get into the crypto Bitcoin business or anything like that. They could see how this is wrong, that this case is wrong, that they're basically saying to these banks or these crypto dealers or anybody, you should have known, you should have been in all of your customers' business, you should have been keeping a big brother watch and surveilling everybody. I think a lot of us agree that's wrong fundamentally, but we probably aren't going to be ever faced with anything like that. However, this point that you're about to make, I think, is for everybody to understand. And you wrote in your article, in every federal criminal case, the Constitution guarantees the right of trial by jury. But another dark secret of the federal criminal justice system is that if an accused person elects to exercise that right, he is punished more severely by many federal judges for doing so. And that is so, when I read that, I thought that is so criminal that our own justice system does this to people. That if you want to go to trial, which is your right, constitutional right, to take your case all the way to trial, they say, all right, then we're going to throw the book at you. And, because you're making us go to trial, which is your constitutional right, we're going to ensure, you're going to be faced with 30 years to life, or you could take our plea deal and say you're guilty and serve 10. Right? That's what they do to people every day in this country for every single crime. And it's so fundamentally wrong and against the Constitution.
It really is. And it's a dark secret. And judges will never admit this, but it's every criminal defense lawyer in the country will tell you this. You go to trial instead of pleading guilty or accepting a plea bargain, and the judge is going to assess a higher punishment.
I mean, that should be criminal in and of itself.
Absolutely. But there's another angle of this that needs to be mentioned, and that's the fine or the forfeiture of his money. The way Ian was making money off this thing was commissions. When he would sell Bitcoins, he would get a commission. And what happened was that in these commissions, he was accumulating Bitcoins.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
And we all know what happened with Bitcoin.
Right.
All of a sudden, the value of money soars. I remember Ian made a lot of people a lot of money, not by design. And so when they go and search his computer, they find Bitcoins worth $5 million that Ian owns. And they seized that $5 million, just like they did with this TD Bank, and says this money is now ours. Well, after Ian was convicted, they pulled one of the dirtiest tricks you could ever imagine. They go to him and they say, look, this $5 million is gone forever. You're never going to see this again.
And why were they taking the 5 million? Because he didn't scam the old ladies. That went to the scammers. So they should have to pay the restitution. What was their reasoning for taking Ian's money?
Because he's part of the scam. See, that's
where the bamboozle. Otherwise, they would have gotten him for fraud. If he was part of the scam, exactly. They would have gotten him for fraud. But they didn't.
Exactly.
So how are they able to legally take his money when it's not for restitution?
Because they bamboozled the judge into thinking that even though he wasn't convicted of fraud, that this was a fraud case. And if you look at the judge's reasoning at the sentencing hearing, the judge goes off on these Lonely Hearts Club people and say, oh, they lost this money and they lost that money. And the prosecutor is saying, Judge, this $5 million should go to reimburse these people. And you can see the judge is a little bit troubled by the notion because he hasn't been convicted of fraud. But that's what they ultimately decide. But they go to Ian, and they say, look, this $5 million is going to go to the government. Okay, this is how it ends up going. How they get him to agree to this. Your $5 million is going to be forfeited to the government, and this is what the probation department is saying. This is not a scam. A fraud case. The probation department tells the judge, this is a money laundering case. There are no victims in a money laundering case.
Right.
There are victims in a fraud case. So the probation department is saying the $5 million is part of a criminal enterprise. No question about that is what they're saying. But it's a money laundering criminal enterprise, not a fraud criminal enterprise. So the money has to go to the government, forfeited to the government, not to these Lonely Hearts Club people. So the prosecutor goes to Ian through his lawyer and says, okay, the $5 million is going to go to the government, but since you don't want it to go to the government, why don't you agree with us that it'll go to the Lonely Hearts Club people anyway? You're going to lose it anyway. So Ian, out of the goodness of his heart, sees the logic of that. And says, well,
I would much rather it go to the ladies than to the government.
Exactly.
What's the government going to do?
And guess what they do? And I cannot believe that Ian agreed to this. But, when you're in despair and depression and under duress, you'll agree to anything, I guess. They insert a provision in there that says this forfeiture is permanent. In other words, even if you win your case on appeal and get this conviction thrown out, you will never be able to get your $5 million back.
Jeez.
And
that's outrageous. That's outrageous.
Oh, it's horrendous. So you have a totally innocent man if he wins.
Yeah.
And he loses his $5 million in savings.
That's why
they portray themselves as good people. Oh, we're helping these Lonely Heart Club people, not with their own money, but with money that's been taken by somebody else. And it had nothing to do with their scam.
So basically, the old ladies got scammed. The old ladies got scammed, and so did Ian. I mean, they all lost money. Nobody got, the scammers themselves ran away with the money, and the government got a lot of money too. And the old ladies, some of them got some money back from Ian, but ultimately they got scam money back. I mean, they got money that was just taken from a different scam.
Yeah, but
from Ian being scammed.
They got the people that they found that had done business with Ian. From what I can understand, they got fully reimbursed with this $5 million. So they didn't end up losing any money. The Lonely Hearts Club people, they got all their money back.
Right.
And if there was any left over, it went to the government. I'm not sure there was any left over after.
Okay. I mean, that's just. All right. So I also want to go over the failure to pay taxes one, because that one there in the transcript, that one is really insane. In the transcript in your article, I think were you actually quoting the actual transcript, the actual interaction? Yes. Because the interaction is so dumb. It was, well, normally don't you just send people notices that they owe taxes? Like, don't you send them a notice and then they're like, oh, I owe money to the government. And then they would go to an account, they would then go and figure out how much they owe. and maybe they would owe nothing once they go through all the deductibles or what they've already, all these things. And the person on stand was like, yeah, that's normal, but okay. So why in this case did they say, yeah, but for you? And that's the other thing is they always get people on taxes. If they can't get you on something else, they'll try to get you on taxes, or they add taxes to it just to make things worse for you, to try to get you to plead out or whatever it is, right? They use it as a point of leverage. But it's crazy that the government has this ability to, I mean, that should be illegal. The government should not be allowed to do that. There should be a standard protocol, like reading somebody their Miranda rights. There should be a standard protocol that you must, as the IRS, send these notices and give the person a chance to pay, or a chance to reconcile, or come up with a payment plan, or go and show you they don't actually owe you after they do all of their deductions and whatnot. It should be by law that you have to allow a person this ability, rather than just, in this particular case, because we don't like the guy, we decided to just not do any of that and just charge him with a crime. Just straight to the crime part. And that's what they did with the taxes. Most of us just get notices from the IRS and then we go on a payment plan. I mean, that's what most of us do. But this guy, they just said, it's criminal. We're just going to get you for tax evasion.
Yeah, and the IRS agent admitted that this is our standard protocol. When we feel somebody owes taxes, we make an appointment with them, we sit down with them, we examine the situation. And usually it's a civil thing where they say, well, you owe this amount and you owe interest and penalty. It's very rarely a criminal thing. But to show you that they knew that this was just a bogus deal, they didn't have to go through this entrapment thing where the guy portrays himself as a drug dealer. They already had the tax violation charge. They could have just stopped right there and charged him. If they thought that was a serious offense, a tax charge, they would have just charged him and not gone through that charade. The fact that they went through the entrapment charade shows you that they knew that they didn't have enough to go after this guy. So instead of making an appointment with him, they just charge him as really what I call an add-on charge. But here's the clincher, that in the testimony, the defense lawyer says, you didn't sit down with him. He could have had deductions, right? And she says, yeah, he could have had deductions. And he says, well, then you don't really know whether he owes any money. And she says, that is correct. We don't know whether he owes any money or not. And he gets convicted for evading taxes when he might not even owe any taxes. It's incredible. I mean, why the judge didn't throw that one out too is beyond me. But I that's why I think on appeal that Ian's got a good shot, because I don't think a person should be convicted of a crime of not paying taxes when he got no taxes.
Well, not only that, but I do think that there needs to be a standard protocol that the government has to go through before they can even charge you with tax evasion. It's just not fair that they can pick and choose who they want to charge with the crime just because they got you on something else, or they want to get you, or they don't like you. And so they weaponize it, and that shouldn't be allowed to be weaponized at all. Tell us about,
it's an arbitrary.
Tell us about his what's going on with his case now. Is he he's sitting in prison, right? He's in prison right now, and he's going to be appealing his case.
It's a travesty in and of itself, because the federal judge could have allowed him to be released pending his appeal. That was his discretion, and he said no. And so he jailed him on the day of the sentencing hearing. And I think it was on the day of the sentencing hearing. It could have been shortly after that. So he's been in jail for a year. He's serving an 8-year prison sentence. The case is on appeal. The government just filed its brief. Ian filed his brief. Normally, the court, it's a 3-judge panel. They will call for oral arguments. That's the standard. They don't have to, but my hunch is that given the complexity of the case, as you pointed out, failing to register, which is the other charge he had, is problematic because it's Bitcoin money. The law requires money transmitters to register, but is Bitcoin money? There's a lot of people that says Bitcoin doesn't meet the qualifications of money, and Congress clearly has not defined all of this clearly. And so my hunch is they're going to call for oral arguments. And so that's why I'm saying that to people, as well as on this website that just popped up, fantastic website called freeiannow.org, not .com, .org. I'm calling on people to appear at that hearing, not with protest signs and protests and interruptions, because that'd be the worst thing you could do. Appellate judges do not take kindly to that kind of thing and might even hold it against the person because you're suggesting that they respond to those things and they don't. But just the mere presence of a full courtroom would send a powerful message to people, to the court, that there are people that are watching, they care, and that might induce the judges, it won't affect their judgment, but it might cause them to give this case more careful attention. This is not just an ordinary run-of-the-mill case. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is the possibility of a pardon or commutation of sentence that can only come from the president, whoever that is elected, is Trump or Harris. Trump seems to be showing more awareness of the Bitcoin situation and the government's assaults on Bitcoin. But the more people that Ian's sort of like the poster child for Bitcoin abuse by the government. In fact, I think there's a good chance his case could reach the U.S. Supreme Court. The court doesn't grant very many appeals, but in this case, they might because of the Bitcoin controversy. So that's what's going on right now. I would really invite people to go to freenow.org, get on their email list, learn when the oral arguments are scheduled, if they are scheduled, and try to make it to Boston at the First Circuit Court of Appeals.
I think it would help to have a packed courtroom. We just dealt with another case of political persecution of a group and the Aruhus, and they cite the packed courtroom as to why they ended up being exonerated on some of the charges. They didn't get on all of them, but on the biggest ones, the worst ones that would have actually, the worst of the worst, they actually ended up getting exonerated. And they think that it was a lot to do with the packed courtroom and people thinking that it was an assault on free speech and free assembly. And I think that could definitely help Ian's case as well. If people show up and say, we're not okay with this. I personally think this case needs to go to the Supreme Court for a variety of reasons. One, the concept of money laundering, two, the ability for the IRS to just arbitrarily decide who they're going to charge with tax evasion versus actually giving notices. Also, the issue of what is Bitcoin and did he need to register as basically a bank or a transaction when they can't even define it, even in Congress. All of those things, I think, need to be dealt with. It just seems like every aspect of this case needs to be addressed by, it's an assault on freedom on almost every single thing he was charged with. This is an assault on our freedoms. I mean, it's insane.
Absolutely. And it really is an assault on all of us. I mean, that's the thing you have to look at. This isn't just Ian Freeman. This is going after all of us. And that's another reason why this case is so important.
Thank you so much for being with us, Jacob. Tell us about the Future of Freedom Foundation that you are the founder of.
Well, FFF is a nonprofit educational foundation. Our mission, since I founded the organization in 1989, has been to present the principled, uncompromising case for the libertarian philosophy. So we don't address just financial privacy. Over the years, the whole welfare state, Social Security, open borders we advocate. We advocate the immediate repeal of all welfare programs, including Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, the dismantling of the national security state, the end of all foreign interventionism, the dismantling of the U.S. empire, the restoration of a limited government republic. We make the case for genuine liberty, which we say necessarily involves making the case for dismantling infringements on freedom, not reforming them. So you'll never see us calling for reform of any of these government programs. We call for their dismantling, which is making the case for freedom.
Excellent.
And we're at FFF.org.
Yeah, because I have that link down below. I also have the link to know about, to follow the Ian Freeman case. And wow, just what a crazy case. What a terrible, this poor guy is just sitting in prison right now. And it just showcases what the government can do when they really don't like you or your business. So thank you so much for bringing this to my attention.
Let me just
go ahead.
One final thing on a personal level. He's about 41 or 42 years old. His wife, I think, is like 28 or 29. They don't have children. But I mean, when you talk about starting a family, this is the age people are thinking about. Many people think about starting a family in the early 40s. You put him at 50 and you put her in her mid 30s.
Right.
Things are different then. And that's why this is another great travesty. This man deserves to be at home with his wife instead of a
Having a
federal
family.
penitentiary.
Yeah. And they might
Absolutely.
even be robbing him of his chance to have a family, is what you're saying. And that's
Exactly.
definitely a
Kim,
travesty.
thank you very much for giving me the
Thank you.
opportunity to share my perspectives. It's an honor to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I do also have the link down below to read the article. I definitely recommend everybody do it. It's a long one. It's a 3-part article. It's very long, but it's very detailed. It goes into more details about this case, and it's educational. I certainly learned a lot reading it. And Jacob, thank you again. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
All right, guys, that is it for tonight's show. Thank you so much for watching. The links are down below for you guys to read the article. It's very in-depth, but it's very good. Also to follow Ian's case, and also to Jacob Hornberger's organization. Those of you who are very libertarian-minded will probably like it. I think anybody, even if you don't consider yourself a libertarian, you should learn libertarian principles, because I think some of them, if not all of them, will resonate with you for sure. So that's it for tonight's show, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, we'll be here every Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Send me more of these types of stories. I was sent this by one of you viewers, brought my attention to this Ian Freeman case. So if you have other cases like this or other stories that you know about, please email them in to me, kim@kimiverson.com. Otherwise, guys, we'll see you next time, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching. Thank you so much for watching. This was just a clip from the longer, larger show that you can catch Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. That'll route you to the platform where you need to be in order to get the full uncensored show every Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Click on that link, watch the full interview. See you there.